So there are two further forms of recording a culture. One of which I'll talk about briefly now, and then the other in the seminars in the next 2 days. The one now is interviewing and oral history. Many of you are quite interested in this, and particularly I think Sarah's been talking to some of you about the idea that you interview your parents and your grandparents about their lives, or relatives, or people you know. And this would be an excellent idea. It's a very good form of fieldwork training to interview someone. And several of my students, Chinese and otherwise, have done interviews with their grandparents. They had a very different experience than you did. And you will begin to appreciate them and become closer to them if you sit down with them and talk about their lives and do a recording of it. And this is an important oral history project which you can be involved with. Again, I mentioned that most of the best material you get as an anthropologist is usually from 4 or 5 individuals, key informants. My key informants were, among them, perhaps the most important was my sister, Gil Meyer, who you see here with me talking to her. And you'll see her talking in a minute. There are 3 kinds of interview. Anthropologists classify interviews into 3 kinds. One is the formal interview, where you have a list of questions. It's just called the structured interview. You have a list of questions, and you read out the first question, they give you an answer. You read out the second question, they give you an answer. Most anthropologists don't really like doing that kind of very formal interview. People often are bored, they often don't give you very good answers. What I use is, mostly, is a method called a semi-structured interview. That is, I have a set of questions in my mind, but I don't keep them on a bit of paper. And I try in an interview with someone to go through all these subjects, but not in any particular order. And if they want to talk about something else, that's fine. So these are a few of the questions. When and where was a person born? Their ancestry, how far back they can remember relatives, including the occupation and temperament of grandparents, their fathers, their sisters and brothers, their first memories and hobbies as a child, their schools, their teachers, and so on. These are questions for academics, so there's stuff about who taught them and their supervisors, and methods of working and thinking, administrative tasks, philosophy and religion, political views and activities, and advice for a young person starting out in your field. These are just 20 or so questions I try to ask. I've done a series of some 200 interviews with interesting thinkers, a few artists. They're all up on my website. They're all accessible from China. If you Google my name, Alan McFarlane, you'll see on the top of the page interviews with thinkers or something like that with a picture. If you go to that, you can then see the anthropologists. There are about 80 anthropologists, a number of historians, sociologists, literary critics, many of them very famous and very interesting, many eminent scientists, 11 or 12 Nobel Prize winners. These are long 2-hour interviews which are available to you. You can either watch them or in various formats, or stream them and put them on your computer. So interviewing is an art, and I won't go into it in detail. I talked about it a bit the other day, and I'll be talking about it more in the seminars in the next 2 days about filming. the key informants for me in the field, one was this young man, Prem Bahadur Guru, who was my closest friend among the gurus on my first field trip. This is later, 20 years later, when we first met. This is 17 years later, in 1986. When we first met, he was about 18 and I was about 25. And we became close friends, and he was the son of the local shaman. So I learnt a huge amount from him. And, as I mentioned, my sister, Dilmaya. I did, fortunately, in 1992, I did a series of 12 20-minute interviews with her about her life. And because we were brother and sister, and because she was a particularly strong personality and understood what I needed, we went into depth about the life of a woman. And I'll just show you a little bit of her talking, though you won't understand it. She was aged about 38 at the time. She's talking about childbirth.
Qui passe mes plus longs mots. Qui passe piba, miesa piba.
Give birth to them at night.
Kunta sere.
How long were you sick? About 6 hours. Very sick. I was very frightened. The rest of the family were terrified. Who was with you? Your husband. What was your husband doing? Children didn't do anything. The throwing away of the we burn the afterbirth and so on and so on. So this is 20 minutes about childbirth. She talked about all the problems of being a woman, and very frankly and openly, as you can see, brother and sister. They're such interesting interviews, and she was such a good subject that I've written a whole book, this book here, which is on fieldwork. I've written a book like this, but bigger, on her, just about her life, based on the interviews. What I did was interview her, and I also filmed her doing all the things she talked about in the interviews. So, as far as I know, this is the first opportunity anyone in the world has had to go inside the world of a simple, ordinary woman in a remote village and to live their life with them, watching them doing things, talking about their life and so on. There are a few famous anthropological books about women. Nisa, the life of a Kung woman, for example. There are about 3 or 4 of these books, but they don't use film at all. There is a film series about the life of a Maasai woman, but it mainly is interviews. It doesn't show the person doing anything. So this book will be your chance when it comes out, as I hope it will in a year or so, to actually enter the world and the views of an ordinary woman. The attempt was to try and cross all those cultural boundaries between a man and a woman, an educated person and a person who'd never been to school, someone who worked with their back and their arms and so on, and someone who worked with their head. All these huge differences. And despite all these huge differences, I felt by the end of it that we could really communicate. And that is what the book is about. Possibilities of cultural communication across all the boundaries. she was a wonderful subject for filming because she understood what I needed, and so she would do things carefully and slowly. She let me film anything. You saw her eating and laughing in some of the films. And this work has continued with some of her children, in particular with Shana Gurung, or Bikash Gurung. This is her youngest son, and he, fortunately for us, decided to stay in Nepal, and he now runs a cultural tourist agency which is specializing in taking people to the remoter villages in this region, to my village and other villages. And here he's talking about himself. He speaks good English, as you see, talking about himself and his work and his life and his knowledge. So one of our plans, as I think I've mentioned, is to try and set up a way whereby any of you who are interested in going to another country and working there for a short time and getting an experience of field work with some guidance. He's just bought some land on which he hopes to build a tourist lodge and research centre, and we've been talking with some of the authorities in your university about the possibility of gradually building up a research station where students can go and train. They would watch the films I've made here, they'd have a copy of the book, this would be published, so they could prepare before they went, then go and live in another culture for 2 or 3 weeks, do a small field study, and then come back and write it up. And this would be might be a valuable form of fieldwork training. So here, just for a moment, Shana Gurung talking about himself and his life.
So, first tell me your name.
I'm Vikas Gurung.
And how old are you?
I'm now 40 years old.
And tell me your mother and father's name.
Actually, my father's name is Suribad Gurung, and my mother is Dilmayan Gurung.
And where were you born?
I was born in Thak.
And where is Thak?
Thak is the western part of Nepal and not from beautiful city Pokhara.
And do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have 2 brothers and 1 sister.
And what are their names?
And my older brother's name is Krishna Gurung, and the younger brother is Om Gurung, and I have a sister, it's Prem Kumari Gurung.
What are you say Gurung, who are the Gurungs?
Gurung is like a after our clan, and who from like north part of Nepal, and maybe our first generation was come with her there from China or somewhere else.
And they came down here through Tibet, or how did they come to Nepal?
They came Nepal through Tibet, and then Muslim, and Monan, and now we are in all over the Nepal. Through Muslim, Monan, and Sigles, Gangtok, and now all over Nepal.
And did they come over? I see there's some big mountains behind you.
So that's they came over those mountains, which is the Annapurna Ranges. So I also interviewed other people. This is another of my relatives, Manu Gurung, who's now in London. This is my adopted father, who I interviewed. My uncle, or sort of uncle, who is very interested in the culture and religion of the people I worked with, and we wrote a book together about the Gurus. And then there are friends. I mentioned yesterday that there was one old man who decided that he trusted us and would tell us the secret history of the village, and this is the person, Bhadra Singh Guru. He knew the village better than anyone else. Many anthropologists find one wise older person who really knows almost everything there is to know about a place. You can find such a person. You just have to download, take down all their ideas and thoughts, and you will have a wonderful picture. And this was the person who gave us that picture. His uncle's name was down behind. Doing the genealogy of So this is a genealogy that he's reciting of the family. And this is another sort of informant. This then young man was one of the most experienced and interesting shamans among the Gurus. He later came to England, where he is one of the top practitioners of shamanic work. And here he'd been in the British Army, so he's talking about the ritual he's about to do. He's actually just describing the villages around. He's going to now describing what he's about to do in a very complex ritual. He has to put soot under his chin to protect himself.
Is it also effective? You said that if they had practiced down the street.
This actually illustrates a point I could have made under religion, which is that if you're going to watch a complex event or ritual or other event, you know it's going to happen. If possible, go through it with someone before it happens, so that you get an idea of what's going to happen and you can understand it better. This was you don't just talk to the local people, you talk to people who know them as well. This was a British Gurkha officer, John Cross, who we've known for many years. He was the person who took these people and decided which of them would go into the British Army. And he retired and lives in Pokhara. And he has been adopted a Guru son who looks after him. And he knows the background. He's worked in many parts of the world. He's a wonderful speaker of many languages, and he's worked in Malaysia and so on and so on. And he gives the broad framework of Nepali politics and how these people fit in with the wider world. So interviewing is very important, and I'll be talking a bit more about that when we come to filming.